History remembers kings and crusaders, saints and martyrs. But hidden among the chronicles of the Middle Ages, in the margins of parchment and in the whispers of peasants, there exists another story, one that few dared to write in full. A story of a man not of flesh and blood alone, but of iron. The chronicles speak of him with fear, never by name. Some call him Der Eisenritter, the Iron Knight. Others speak of Der Mann ohne Gesicht, the man without a face. What unites all the accounts is the same chilling detail. No one ever saw his skin. No one ever heard his voice as a man. He lived, fought, and died, if he died at all, entombed within armor that could not be removed. The first mention appears in a German manuscript of the late 12th century, a battle record from the Rhineland. A monk describes a knight who fought with such endurance that men swore he felt no pain, that no blade could pierce him, that he never removed his helm, not even to eat or pray. The monk's words tremble on the page, he does not remove his armor. His steps are heavy, hollow. And when I drew near, I heard no breath, no heartbeat, only the sound of iron. What was he? A man cursed? A revenant in steel? Or a warning, etched in legend, of what happens when man and war become inseparable? The peasants had their own stories. In villages along the Rhine, mothers frightened children into obedience with warnings, "Do not stray into the woods, for the Iron Knight walks there still. You will hear his steps before you see him, and once he finds you, no prayer will save you." Some swore they heard the echo of armored footsteps at night, though no rider passed their road. Others told of seeing a dark figure on the horizon, a knight whose armor gleamed though no sun touched it, whose shadow stretched impossibly long. The soldiers who faced him remembered something worse. In the chaos of battle he did not fight like other men. He did not shout, he did not rally, he did not pray. He moved with silence, striking with precision, as if every blow had been rehearsed 1,000 times. His enemies swore his visor was empty, that when they peered close, they saw only blackness within. And yet he was not invincible. He bled red human blood. Men swore they wounded him. But still he rose, still he fought, still he crushed his enemies beneath his iron weight. And when the battle was done, he did not remove his helm, did not tend to his wounds. He simply stood among the dead, a statue of steel. The church condemned him as cursed. Priests claimed his armor was a prison, forged by the devil as punishment for sins unnamed. Some whispered that he had once been a knight of holy orders who betrayed his vows, and for that betrayal, God bound him forever in iron, his flesh rotting within, his soul damned to wander. Others insisted the opposite, that he was no man at all, but an empty shell, a suit of armor given life by sorcery, walking without heart or spirit. Yet there were those who worshipped him. Peasants desperate for protection left offerings of bread and wine at crossroads, begging the Iron Knight to pass them by. Mercenaries, brutal and lawless, swore oaths in his name, believing his endurance would be theirs if they offered blood to the soil. Songs whispered by soldiers describe him not as cursed, but as eternal. The Iron Knight does not sleep. The Iron Knight does not fall. He is the march of war itself. He comes for us all. And still the chronicles remain silent on who he truly was. No genealogy, no birth, no heraldry is attached to him. Unlike other knights, he bore no sigil, no banner. His shield was plain. His armor was blackened and scarred, with no decoration. It was as if he sought not glory, not recognition, but only the battle itself. This silence is the loudest detail of all. For history records even minor lords and petty knights. Yet here was a warrior remembered for centuries and still his name is erased. Was it fear that silenced the scribes? Or was it that there was, in truth, no man to name, only the armor, only the iron? What is known is this: wherever war raged in the Rhineland, the Iron Knight appeared. Crusades, feuds, rebellions, his figure stands at the edge of every battle, striking, vanishing, then reappearing years later, unchanged. Men who fought beside him as young soldiers swore they saw him again when they were old, the same armor, the same hollow silence. As if time itself could not touch him. And then, without warning, he vanished. No chronicle records his death. No grave bears his name. Only ruins remain, ruins where peasants swear the echo of armored footsteps can still be heard. The Iron Knight may be gone, or he may still walk, bound to the armor, bound to the curse. This is his story. A story of flesh imprisoned in steel. A story of silence louder than screams. A story of war given form. The story of the Iron Knight. The chronicles that whisper of the Iron Knight never speak of his childhood. No village claims him, no lineage claims his blood. It is as though he entered history already clad in steel, a figure born not of womb or hearth, but of forge and fire. And perhaps, in a sense, he was. The first record of his presence appears in the year 1173, during the wars that tore through the Rhineland. The dukes and princes of the Holy Roman Empire fought among themselves as fiercely as they fought their enemies, each grasping for power while peasants bled and starved. It was in this chaos, in a battle near Worms, that the Iron Knight was first seen. He came with no banner, no retinue, no herald. He simply rode into battle. His armor was blackened, scarred, dented by 100 blows that no smith could explain. Unlike the gleaming plate of noble knights, his bore no polish, no decoration. It was utilitarian, grim, like the husk of something not alive but made to move. His helm bore no crest, no plume, only a closed visor through which no eyes shone. The chronicles describe him as relentless. Where other knights tired, he fought on. Where other men faltered beneath wounds, he pressed forward. Soldiers swore he was struck a dozen times, blades piercing joints, arrows finding gaps, yet he never fell. He did not groan, did not shout, did not even seem to breathe. He advanced with the inevitability of death itself. At first, men thought him charmed, protected by relics or sorcery. Some claimed he was a revenant, risen from the grave in armor to fight until Judgment Day. Others whispered that he was cursed, that once he donned the armor, it fused to his flesh, a second skin that could never be removed. One story tells of a blacksmith in Mainz who swore he had seen the knight after the battle. The smith offered to repair the battered armor, but the knight refused. When pressed, he is said to have raised a gauntlet hand and struck the anvil, splitting the iron with a single blow. "It cannot be mended," the smith muttered afterward, "because it is not armor. It is him." Over the years, the Iron Knight appeared in battle after battle. Sometimes he fought beside imperial forces, sometimes against them. He was no man's vassal, no lord's servant. He was war incarnate, drawn to conflict as wolves are drawn to blood. Knights who fought alongside him told of his silence. Around campfires, while others feasted and drank, the Iron Knight stood apart, unmoving like a statue. He never removed his helm, never revealed his face. Some soldiers claimed they heard faint sounds within the armor, not breathing, not speech, but the hollow echo of chains dragging across stone. And yet he was not invincible. On more than one occasion, men swore he fell in battle, struck down beneath a rain of spears or buried under corpses. But when the field was cleared, his body was gone. Only footsteps remained, deep prints in the mud where the weight of iron had risen and walked again. The nobles feared him, for he could not be bought or commanded. The church feared him more, for he did not kneel before crosses or relics. Priests claimed his armor was forged in hell, quenched in human blood, and that the man inside, if there was a man, was damned beyond redemption. Some sermons described him as the anti-knight, a parody of God's warriors, armored not for glory but for eternal penance. But among peasants and soldiers, another legend grew. They saw in him not damnation but endurance. A man who could not be broken, who bore the wounds of all battles and still walked. They left offerings of bread and iron nails at crossroads, begging his protection. To them he was not cursed but blessed with the strength they wished for themselves. And always the sound accompanied him. Witnesses describe the sound of his approach as a rhythm of hollow iron, heavier than any man should bear, echoing across fields and valleys. Not the gallop of a horse, but the steady, inevitable march of footsteps, metallic and cold. Once heard, it could not be mistaken. Soldiers spoke of shivering when they heard it behind them in the fog, turning, and seeing the faceless helm emerge. It was said he never rode. He walked, step after step, as if bound to the earth by chains. When battle called, he did not rush. He advanced, inevitable, unhurried, each step striking terror in those who heard it. And so he became legend. The Iron Knight. Not noble, not saint, not even man, something between relic and curse, warrior and revenant. His silence was louder than banners, his iron heavier than crowns. The chronicles cannot agree on what he was. Some swear he was a man who sinned so greatly that God bound him in steel until the end of time. Others insist he was no man at all, but a suit of armor given life, hollow within, a vessel of war itself. And a few whisper the darkest tale of all, that he had once removed the armor, but beneath it, there was no flesh, only more iron, as if he had become metal through and through. Whatever he was, his march began in the Rhineland. And from there, his shadow spread across Europe, carried not by heralds, but by the sound of footsteps echoing in the night. This was the birth of the Iron Knight, the warrior who could not die, the man who could not be freed, the prisoner of iron. The Iron Knight was not feared only for his strength in battle, but for the mystery of his prison. For every warrior has scars, every knight removes his helm to drink, Every man sleeps in flesh, not steel. Yet he was never seen without it. The armor was not clothing. It was skin. The chronicles, sparse and fearful, hint at the curse. Some say it was punishment, others a pact, and others still, a fate chosen. Whatever the truth, the legend of the metal skin became inseparable from his name. There were those who claimed that once, long ago, he had been a man like any other. A knight of noble blood, proud, arrogant, perhaps cruel. That in his hubris he swore never to lay down his sword, never to rest, never to remove his armor until his enemies were crushed. And so God, or the devil, took him at his word. His oath became flesh. The armor closed upon him and it never opened again. Others whispered a darker tale. That he had forged a pact with something inhuman. In exchange for strength beyond men, he surrendered his body. The armor became his coffin, his cage, his new form. What remained inside was no longer flesh but something twisted, neither man nor ghost, bound to walk as long as war endured. The most chilling testimony comes from those who swore they tried to unbind him. In one account, a wounded Iron Knight was dragged into a village after a skirmish. The peasants, curious and fearful, tried to remove his helm. They hammered at the bolts, cut at the straps, but nothing yielded. The helm did not bend, did not open, did not move. One farmer swore he felt it shift as if it were not attached by hinge or leather but fused like bone. Terrified, they abandoned the attempt. By morning, the knight was gone, leaving only bloodstains where he had lain. Others claimed the armor grew with him, that dents smoothed themselves overnight, that rust never formed though no smith touched it. Some even swore they heard the sound of grinding from within, as if gears turned, as if the armor itself breathed. But the greatest horror was hunger. Men who camped near him swore that he never ate. He sat apart, unmoving as soldiers roasted meat and drank ale. Yet the food would vanish. A piece of bread here, a strip of meat there, gone without sound. Some believed he consumed it within the armor, through some unseen maw. Others believed he no longer needed food at all, that he fed on something else, on blood spilled in battle, on fear itself. And what of his face? That is the question that has haunted every story, every song. What lay beneath the helm? A monk of Cologne, who claimed to glimpse beneath the visor's slit, wrote in horror, "I saw not eyes but hollows. Not skin but iron." As if the man within had been devoured, and the armor alone remained. Other witnesses tell of red glimmers, faint as embers, glowing in the darkness of his helm. Not eyes but sparks, as though the soul within burned but faintly, trapped in metal for eternity. The curse of the metal skin was not merely physical, it was spiritual. For no man could live so long without being unmade inside. Chroniclers noted his silence above all else. The Iron Knight never spoke. Not in command, not in prayer, not even in pain. His silence was absolute. And silence is its own kind of curse. Soldiers whispered that he had forgotten human speech, that he no longer possessed a tongue to form words, that all that remained was the echo of iron. Yet others believed silence was his choice. That the armor held his voice, but that to release it would mean unleashing something terrible. And so he remained mute, lest the curse within him escape. Whatever the truth, the curse marked him as otherworldly. He was not a man who wore armor, he was armor. He was a weapon without sheath, a blade without rest. And the longer he endured, the less human he became. Songs turned darker. He cannot bleed, he cannot pray. Iron binds him night and day. No flesh, no face, no mercy given. The Knight of Iron is never forgiven. The people feared him, yet they also pitied him. For to live without flesh, without voice, without rest, is not life but torment. A walking tomb, a man entombed alive, cursed to march until the end of days. And still he fought. Still he marched. Still he bore the weight of his prison. The curse of the metal skin made him immortal in legend, if not in truth. For even if he could die, his name could not. And as long as war endured, men whispered that the Iron Knight would return, his armor echoing in the night, his silence louder than screams. For the curse was not only his. It was the curse of all men who give themselves wholly to war, until they too become nothing but weapons, nothing but iron. This was the fate of the Iron Knight. To be more than man, less than man. To be flesh devoured by steel. To be prisoner and jailer, coffin and corpse, all in one. The curse of the metal skin. To understand why the Iron Knight became legend, one must look to the battlefield. For it was there, amid the clash of steel and the cries of dying men, that his curse was revealed in full. Other knights fought for banners, for lords, for God. He fought for nothing, or for something darker, something no man could name. His presence was not announced with horns or drums. It was felt. First as silence, then as a sound, the hollow rhythmic echo of iron boots upon earth. Soldiers swore their hearts grew heavy at the sound, as if each step pressed upon their chests. When he entered the fray, he did not gallop on horseback like other knights. He walked, step by step, steady, inevitable. Arrows flew, swords struck, but nothing slowed him. He advanced as if time itself obeyed his march. The chronicles describe his style of fighting with awe and horror. He did not flail or waste movement. Every strike was precise, every blow fatal. His sword, a massive greatsword, blackened like his armor, was swung with such force that shields split and men were hewn in two. He did not shout as he struck. He did not curse or call upon saints. He killed in silence, and the silence was worse than screams. Witnesses claimed his strength was beyond human. One knight of Bavaria wrote, "I saw him cleave through 3 men with one stroke, their bodies falling like wheat before the scythe. I struck him thrice and he did not fall. His armor bore dents, yet he moved as if unbroken. I swear to you he is no man but iron made flesh." His endurance was equally terrifying. Wounds that would cripple others seemed to mean nothing to him. Blood seeped from rents in his armor, proof he was still flesh, yet he never faltered. Even when pierced with arrows, he marched. Even when struck down, he rose. It was said that only fire could slow him, that he feared no steel forged by men. And his cruelty was unmatched. The Iron Knight gave no quarter. While other warriors took prisoners for ransom, he slaughtered all in his path. Knights, squires, peasants, it mattered not. After battles, corpses were found with limbs severed, faces crushed, bodies torn apart as if by a warhammer wielded by wrath itself. One monk wrote with trembling hand, "He has no mercy, for mercy is a human thing. And he is not human." But perhaps the most terrifying stories are not of his strength, but of his silence. For in the chaos of war, men scream, out of rage, fear, agony. The Iron Knight made no sound. His blows fell in silence, his victims died in silence, and when the field was strewn with the dead, he stood among them like a statue, his helm facing the horizon, unmoving, unbreathing, unbroken. This silence unmade armies. Men could face death, but they could not face emptiness. To fight the Iron Knight was to face the void, to strike a figure that did not bleed as men bleed, did not fear as men fear, did not speak as men speak. Soldiers broke not because he slew them, but because they believed they fought something that could not die. There are tales of entire companies fleeing at the sight of him. Of castles surrendering when they heard his steps outside their walls. Of mercenaries who swore they would rather face 10 men than one Iron Knight. And yet he was not invincible. He could be struck down. Chronicles mention him collapsing beneath a rain of spears, or disappearing beneath a mass of enemies. But always his body was gone when the field was searched. Some swore his brothers, or demons, carried him away. Others believed he rose again, tireless, unbroken, cursed to fight forever. One legend tells of a battle in Saxony where the Iron Knight was set ablaze with oil and pitch. Witnesses swore they heard the iron scream, not a human voice but the shriek of metal under fire. The flames consumed him and his form collapsed into ash. Yet months later he was seen again marching through Thuringia, armor blackened, helm unbroken. As if fire had only reforged him. To the church, his lack of mercy was proof of damnation. Priests preached that he had surrendered his soul to war, and that every step he took dragged him deeper into hell. He is the soldier who prayed not for heaven but for blood, one bishop declared. And now blood is all he shall have. But to soldiers he was more complicated. Some feared him as a demon. Others admired him as the perfect warrior, unyielding, unstoppable, eternal. Songs in taverns whispered, "He does not fall, he does not rest. Iron binds him to his quest. No God, no Lord, no mercy's breath. The Iron Knight is only death." And so his legend spread not only through chronicles, but through fear and awe. Lords told his story to warn against pride. Priests told it to terrify the faithful. But soldiers told it with envy, wishing for his strength, his endurance, his silence. For in war to be a man is to suffer. To be iron is to endure. The Iron Knight was more than a warrior. He was the embodiment of war itself, merciless, endless, unfeeling. And that is why men feared him. For when they looked upon him, they saw not just a knight in armor. They saw the truth of war, that once begun it never ends. This was the Iron Knight on the battlefield. A man? A monster? Or war itself, marching in iron skin? The Iron Knight was not only a terror of battlefields. His shadow stretched beyond the clash of armies, into the villages and hamlets that dotted the medieval world. For while knights were known to pillage and ravage, the stories of the Iron Knight were different. Stranger, colder, more horrifying. Peasants whispered that after battles, when the fields lay strewn with corpses, the Iron Knight did not leave with the armies. Instead he lingered. He wandered the dead in silence, his iron feet pressing into the blood-soaked earth, his faceless helm turning from body to body as though searching for something. One account from Alsace tells of a boy who followed his father to scavenge after a battle. Amid the bodies they saw him. The Iron Knight stood alone, sword planted in the ground, his hands resting upon the hilt. He did not move. He did not speak. The boy's father urged silence, but the child cried out. The knight turned, and though his visor showed only darkness, the boy swore he felt eyes burning into him. Eyes colder than steel, older than war itself. They fled, and when they looked back, the knight was gone, though his footprints remained. Other tales tell of him entering villages not as conqueror, but as shadow. A farmer in Mainz swore that one winter's night, he heard the sound of iron steps approaching his home. Thinking soldiers had come, he opened the door, only to see the Iron Knight standing in the snow, unmoving. No words. No gesture. Just silence. Terrified, the farmer crossed himself and closed the door. When dawn came, the snow bore the prints of iron boots circling the house 3 times. But the night was gone. There are darker stories still. In Lorraine, an entire village was found abandoned. No bodies, no blood, no fire. Only silence. The houses stood empty, meals left half-eaten, doors ajar. In the center of the village stood a single object, a helmet, blackened, scarred, and hollow. Peasants who found it swore they heard a faint ringing, as if iron footsteps echoed within the empty shell. They fled, leaving the place forever. The horror of the Iron Knight was not in slaughter alone, but in presence. His silence was an omen, his steps a curse. Mothers told children that if they heard metal in the night, they must never open the door, never look. For to meet the knight's faceless helm was to be marked, and those who were marked vanished. Some claimed he took the dead. Monks recorded fields where bodies were missing, though no scavengers had touched them. Graves were found empty, earth clawed from within, as though corpses had risen to march with him. Priests swore the Iron Knight did not fight alone, but commanded a legion of hollow men, soldiers bound in rusted armor, walking without voice, shadows of his curse. And yet not all stories spoke of death. Some spoke of judgment. In the Black Forest, villagers swore the Iron Knight appeared when crimes went unpunished. A thief was found crushed, bones shattered as though by a mailed fist. A murderer vanished, only his knife left behind, bent in half. People whispered that the knight was not merely cursed, but chosen, an executioner of sins too foul for priests to cleanse. But if so, who chose him? God? The devil? Or the armor itself, hungering for justice and blood? These contradictions only deepened the fear. Was he a demon who preyed on the innocent? Or an angel of wrath, punishing the guilty? The chronicles never answer. They only repeat the same refrain. Where the Iron Knight walked, silence followed, and men vanished. One of the most chilling testimonies comes from a nun of Strasbourg. She wrote, "I heard the steps in the cloister, though all gates were shut. I saw him pass, tall as a giant, clad in blackened iron. I prayed, but my prayers felt empty as if the walls themselves swallowed them. He left no sound but the echo of his march. For 3 nights I dreamed of him. On the 4th, the abbot was found dead, crushed beneath a weight no man could bear." To the church these tales were heresy. They preached that the Iron Knight was a curse upon Christendom, that his silence was proof of his damnation. Yet peasants clung to the stories, retelling them with fear and awe. For the horror of the knight was not only in what he did, but in what he represented. That war itself could leave the battlefield and enter their homes, faceless, endless, inevitable. For centuries, villages feared the sound of iron at night. And even now, in ruins where wars once raged, travelers swear they sometimes hear footsteps echoing in the dark, though no living man walks there. The Iron Knight was more than a warrior. He was a shadow cast upon the land, a presence that lingered long after battles ended, long after armies marched away. His silence was heavier than screams, his steps louder than bells. And in every village where he passed, men learned that war has no boundaries, that once unleashed, it walks everywhere. This was the horror of the Iron Knight in the villages, not the clash of armies but the echo of iron in the night, marking the living as surely as the dead. By the late 12th century, the Iron Knight was no longer only a whisper in peasant huts or a terror in the fields of battle. His presence had grown into something intolerable for those who ruled. Princes, dukes, bishops, all began to see him not just as a monster but as a threat to their power. For nothing terrified the nobility more than a warrior who bowed to no lord, no cross, no crown. At first they dismissed him as a brigand, a mercenary with a taste for legend. But when reports came that entire companies had fled at the sound of his march, when castles surrendered at the sight of his faceless helm, they realized they faced not myth but reality. And reality had to be crushed. The first attempts were small. Mercenary bands were hired to find and kill him. They set traps in forests, laid ambushes on roads. None succeeded. Survivors spoke of hearing his steps in the fog, of arrows striking his armor and falling uselessly, of comrades cut down one by one in silence. In the end, the huntsmen became the hunted, their corpses left for crows, their armor twisted as though by some great weight. Frustrated, the princes turned to knights sworn to their service. They gathered men of valor, armed them with the best steel, and sent them forth with banners raised. Yet even these failed. The knights returned with shattered shields and broken spirits, swearing that they had faced not a man but a force of nature. He does not yield, one wrote, because he does not care for victory. He fights only because he must. How do you kill such a thing? The church grew louder in its condemnation. Bishops preached that the Iron Knight was a vessel of Satan, that his armor was a tomb forged in hell, his silence the silence of damnation. Papal letters circulated, demanding his destruction, warning that if he walked unchecked, faith itself would weaken. The peasants' awe for him was seen as heresy. And so the princes and bishops joined hands. They declared the Iron Knight an enemy of Christendom, and a bounty was placed upon him, gold enough to buy a village, titles for any knight who could bring back proof of his death. But how does one kill what cannot die? One of the most famous hunts took place in 1189. A coalition of German lords assembled a small army of over 300 men, led by knights sworn to the emperor himself. They tracked the Iron Knight into the Black Forest, where rumors said he dwelled among ruins of an ancient fortress. For 3 days they hunted, hearing nothing but the caw of crows and the crunch of their own boots. On the 4th day the sound began, the hollow, steady march of iron, echoing through the trees. Panic spread. Some knights swore the sound came from behind them, others from ahead. The forest itself seemed to carry the echo. When he appeared it was sudden. He stepped from the mist, alone, faceless, sword in hand. The knights charged, but he did not falter. Witnesses claimed he moved like a storm, cutting through them with inhuman precision. Arrows struck him and glanced away. Spears splintered on his armor. By nightfall half the hunters lay dead. And yet the Iron Knight did not pursue the survivors. He let them flee, carrying terror back to their lords. It was as though his victory was not in slaughter but in fear, the echo of iron louder than cries of men. But the hunts did not end. Princes plotted anew, bishops prayed louder, and still he walked. They sent relics, believing holy objects could wound him. Crosses raised before him did nothing. They tried fire, oil, and pitch. He burned, and yet he returned, blackened but unbroken. They dug pits, set traps, loosed hounds. Nothing worked. The Iron Knight endured. Some began to whisper that he could not be killed because he was already dead. Others insisted he was no man but the spirit of war itself, given flesh and iron to remind men that violence never dies. Yet perhaps the most chilling attempt came from within the church itself. In 1204, an ambitious bishop claimed he had discovered the secret of the knight's power. He gathered monks, relics, and holy water, and with the blessing of lords, he arranged an ambush near a ruined monastery. Accounts claim the Iron Knight was captured that day, bound in chains blessed by priests. They dragged him into the church, locked him within the crypt, and sealed the door with crosses and holy seals. For days they heard nothing but silence. Then on the 7th night the bells rang though no hand pulled them. The seals shattered. The doors swung open. The crypt was empty. Only iron footprints marked the stone floor, leading into the darkness. The bishop vanished soon after. Some claimed he was taken by the night. Others whispered he joined him, his soul devoured by the armor. From that day few dared to hunt him openly. For every attempt ended the same, with men lost, faith shaken, fear growing. The more they sought to end him, the stronger his legend became. The princes learned that some enemies cannot be killed with swords, nor silenced with gold. The church learned that some curses cannot be exorcised. And the peasants learned that no power, secular or holy, could protect them from the sound of iron in the night. The Iron Knight had defied kings and bishops alike. And in doing so he had become something more than a man, more than a curse. He had become a truth, war-given form, indestructible, inevitable. And though the hunts would continue, though men would still try, none could claim his head, none could silence his steps. The night endured. The Iron walked on. The Iron Knight had endured fire, steel, and the wrath of princes. He had walked through battlefields as though death itself could not claim him. But even legends must one day vanish. And the disappearance of the Iron Knight was as strange, as haunting as his life. It happened, the chronicles suggest, sometime in the early 13th century, though no exact year is agreed upon. Some say it was 1217, others place it decades later. The truth is obscured by silence, as though scribes themselves feared to mark the moment when the march of iron ceased. The most common version of the tale begins with a castle, an ancient fortress on the edge of the Black Forest, known to locals as Drachenfels, the Dragon's Rock. It had long stood in ruin, its stones blackened by fire from wars past. Villagers swore it was haunted, that no lord dared rebuild it. And yet, one winter's night, the Iron Knight was seen marching toward it, alone, his steps echoing in the snow. 4 days afterward, strange lights were seen upon the battlements. Fires burned though no smoke rose. Figures moved through the ruins, tall and hollow, clad in rusted mail. Wolves howled in endless chorus, circling the fortress but never entering. It was said that priests dared approach with relics, but the air itself grew heavy, and they fled before reaching the gates. Then came the night of fire. A blood-red moon hung over Drachenfels as villagers watched from the valleys. Flames erupted from the castle, brighter than any torch, as if the fortress itself burned from within. Stones cracked, towers collapsed, and a roar like grinding iron rolled across the land. Some swore they heard screams, not human but metallic shrieks of armor bending, breaking, melting. Others swore they heard chanting, a chorus of voices speaking in a tongue long dead. By dawn the fire was gone. Drachenfels was silent once more. The Iron Knight was never seen again. What happened within those walls? Theories abound, none conclusive. One tale says that the princes and bishops, tired of his defiance, lured him there with promises of battle. An army ambushed him within the ruins, and though he slew hundreds, they brought the fortress down upon him. Crushed beneath stone, entombed in fire, the Iron Knight was finally buried where no man could walk again. Another tale insists the opposite, that no army touched him. That the knight himself walked into Drachenfels not to fight, but to end his curse. That within the ruins lay an altar, a remnant of pagan days where he sought release. Perhaps he prayed for the first and last time. Perhaps he bargained once more. Whatever he did, the fire was not destruction but transformation, the moment his prison consumed him utterly. But the darkest tale is the one whispered still in the valleys. That the Iron Knight did not die, nor was he destroyed. That the fire was not an ending but a door. That Drachenfels was a gate to the abyss, and that on that night the armor walked into it, carrying its prisoner beyond the world of men. Some say his steps echo still, not on earth, but beneath it, in caverns where light never shines. And when the earth trembles, when stones crack, it is his march, shaking the bones of the world. What is known is this: after Drachenfels the Iron Knight was gone. No battle records mention him again. No peasants whispered of his march. No priests cursed his name. His silence had at last become complete. Yet the ruins bore marks, strange, unnatural marks. Travelers who dared enter spoke of stones blackened not by fire but by something hotter, something unnatural, as though the rock itself had melted. In the halls, claw-like gouges scarred the walls, too deep for tools, too wild for men. And in the great hall, amid rubble and ash, a sword was found, massive, blackened, its blade warped as if half melted. It was too heavy for any man to lift. The villagers left it there, fearing the curse. Centuries later, when scholars examined the ruins, they reported something stranger still. In the deepest chamber, beneath layers of rubble, they found prints, not of feet but of iron boots, pressed deep into stone, as if the knight had walked into the earth itself. The tracks ended at a wall of unbroken rock. Nowhere further. As if he had passed through stone and vanished into the abyss. To the church, Drachenfels was a victory. They declared that the Iron Knight had been destroyed by divine fire, his curse ended by God's will. Yet curiously, no bishop claimed credit, no record described the army that slew him. The victory was silent, like the knight himself. To peasants, Drachenfels became taboo. They avoided the ruins, leaving offerings at a distance, bread, coins, scraps of iron. For they believed the knight still lingered, buried but not gone, listening from beneath the stone. And to storytellers, Drachenfels was not an ending but a warning. For they swore that the Iron Knight was not destroyed, only waiting. That one day when war again covered the land, when men once more gave themselves wholly to steel, his march would resume, rising from the abyss with footsteps louder than thunder. The fall of the Iron Knight into the abyss remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of medieval legend. Did he burn? Did he break? Or did he walk into something darker than death? The chronicles do not say. But the silence that followed was louder than words. For the first time in over a century the echo of iron ceased, and men realized how much heavier silence can be than sound. The disappearance of the Iron Knight at Drachenfels should have been the end. And yet, silence did not erase him. For centuries after the fire faded, his shadow lingered, not in the chronicles of princes, but in the strange discoveries that haunted monasteries, graveyards, and ruins. In the year 1293, a group of monks digging a new crypt beneath their abbey uncovered a sealed chamber. Within it lay a suit of armor, blackened and scarred. At first they thought it a noble burial forgotten by history. But when they lifted the visor they recoiled in terror. For there was nothing inside. No skull, no bones, no dust. Only emptiness, as though the armor itself had once lived and then hollowed. The monks buried it again, sealing the chamber with prayers, but word escaped. Among the people it was whispered, "The knight has left his shell." Other discoveries followed. In Swabia, peasants repairing a ruined chapel found a sarcophagus of stone. Carved upon it was the image of a knight, faceless, his hands crossed over a sword. When opened, the coffin contained not a body, but fragments of iron, gauntlets, greaves, the warped remains of a helm. The metal was cold to the touch, unnaturally heavy, and when brought to the light, it seemed to drink the sun, reflecting nothing. The priests ordered it melted, but the forge could not consume it. The pieces were eventually buried deep in a well, never to be touched again. Travelers in Franconia told of stumbling upon tombs that bore no names, only plain shields carved in stone. Inside, the coffins were empty save for dust and iron boots, standing upright as though their owner had walked out. Scholars puzzled, peasants feared, but all agreed on one thing: the hollowness was more terrifying than a corpse. For death leaves remains. Curses leave nothing. By the 15th century the Iron Knight had become more legend than memory. Yet discoveries persisted. In 1431, near the ruins of Drachenfels itself, a band of shepherds unearthed an ancient crypt hidden in the hillside. Within it lay a massive sword, rusted yet whole, its hilt worn smooth by centuries of grip. Around it, scattered pieces of armor lay in a circle, as if discarded. But once more, no bones, no flesh, only emptiness. The shepherds swore that when they touched the blade, it vibrated faintly as though something within it still breathed. The most chilling tale comes from Bohemia. In 1512, gravediggers uncovered a knight's tomb unlike any other. The coffin was sealed with chains, rusted but unbroken. Inside was a full suit of armor, intact, pristine, though centuries had passed. Yet when they lifted the helm they found not a face, but darkness deeper than shadow, a void that seemed to swallow their torches. Terrified, they reburied the armor and fled. That night, villagers claimed to hear footsteps on the church roof, echoing long after the bells had ceased. To scholars these hollow tombs were puzzles. To the church they were dangerous relics, reminders of a curse they had failed to erase. Many were sealed, burned, or hidden, but the stories always leaked. And to peasants they were proof. Proof that the Iron Knight had not ended in fire. Proof that his march continued, unseen, unheard, but always present. Songs of the later Middle Ages spoke of the hollow tombs. He does not sleep in earth or stone. No flesh, no bone, no rest, no home. The hollow tomb is all that's left. The Iron Knight is never bereft. What was the meaning of these empty graves? Were they remnants of men who imitated the Iron Knight, burying themselves in iron shells? Were they failed attempts to contain him, prisons abandoned by their prisoner? Or were they echoes of his curse, fragments he shed as he marched through centuries? The hollowness itself is the answer, perhaps. For the Iron Knight was always more absence than presence. A man with no name, no face, no voice. An armor with no flesh. His story is one of emptiness, of the void war leaves behind. And so it is fitting that his tombs are hollow, his graves empty. Even now, ruins across Europe bear strange scars. Stones split as if by heat. Footprints of iron pressed into places no man could walk. Helmets unearthed with no owner, swords resting across empty coffins. The Iron Knight is gone, and yet he remains. His tombs are empty because his march has no end. This is the horror of the hollow tomb. Not that it holds him, but that it does not. Centuries have passed since the fires of Drachenfels. The princes and bishops who feared him are long buried. The monks who wrote trembling words about him have turned to dust. And yet, the Iron Knight has not vanished. For his legend is not locked in manuscripts alone. It breathes still in the whispers of villages, in the stones of ruined castles, in the footsteps heard at night. Even in the modern age, when iron has become steel and battlefields roar with fire rather than swords, travelers swear the Iron Knight walks on. In the 18th century, during the Age of Enlightenment, scholars dismissed him as myth. Yet strange testimonies continued. A Prussian officer marching through the Black Forest reported that one night his men froze in terror at a sound, heavy metallic footsteps echoing through the fog. They searched the woods, finding no soldier, no horse. But the sound followed them for miles, vanishing only at dawn. The officer recorded the event reluctantly, ashamed to put superstition in his journal. But his men never forgot. In the 19th century, shepherds near the ruins of Drachenfels swore they saw him. A tall figure clad in blackened armor, standing among the stones at dusk. When approached, the figure did not move. But when the shepherds turned away, the sound of steps followed them down the hill. They fled, and when they looked back, the fortress was empty, yet the snow bore prints of iron boots, deep and fresh. During the Great War of the 20th century, French soldiers reported hearing footsteps in abandoned trenches along the Rhine. Some swore they saw a figure in ancient armor moving through the mist, silent, faceless, sword in hand. Officers dismissed it as fear, hallucinations born of exhaustion. But the legend spread among the men. The Iron Knight walks with us, for war has called him again. Even in our own time, hikers and explorers whisper the same. In the ruins of castles and forests where battles once raged, people claim to hear it. A sound unnatural in its weight, metallic and hollow. Sometimes it is distant, echoing faintly as if from beneath the ground. Sometimes it is near, behind them, though no figure can be seen. And always it stops when they look. In 1998, a group of archaeologists excavating near Drachenfels recorded strange phenomena. Instruments detected vibrations in the stone below, rhythmic, steady like steps. At first they thought it machinery, but there was none nearby. The recordings remain unexplained, locked in archives, dismissed as equipment malfunction. But among those who were there, the story is told differently. We heard him. We heard the night march. So what is he? A man cursed, trapped forever in his armor? A revenant summoned by war? Or something darker? A truth, not a person, that walks as long as violence endures? The Iron Knight has always been more absence than presence. No face. No voice. No name. Only the armor, the echo, the silence. And perhaps that is why his legend endures. For he is not only a man lost to history. He is a mirror. A reflection of what war does to us all, stripping away face, voice, mercy until nothing remains but iron. The marches of history are filled with iron steps. From medieval battlefields to modern wars, the sound has never ceased. The Iron Knight may be gone. Or perhaps he was never truly here. Perhaps he is only the shape we give to the eternal truth of violence, that once war begins, it does not end. It only marches on. And so, when you walk in ruins at night, when the wind grows still, when the ground trembles faintly beneath your feet, listen. If you hear the echo of hollow footsteps, steady and relentless, know this. The Iron Knight has not vanished. The Iron Knight never vanishes. He marches still.